My husband made me coffee with a strange smell. I swapped mugs with my SLF and everything changed. Welcome back with a new real shock story. Before we start, comment and tell me which city you're watching from. At the end, don't forget to subscribe and rate it from 0 to 10. Let's enjoy the story, everyone. I remember that morning so clearly, though sometimes I wish I could forget it. It started out like any other day, quiet, ordinary, safe. I woke up to the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen, and for a moment, I smiled. My husband never made coffee in the mornings. He usually rushed out before I even opened my eyes. But that day was different. The smell was strong, almost bitter, but I didn't think much of it. Maybe he'd used a new blend or put too much in the machine. I got out of bed, wrapped my robe around me, and followed that smell, still half asleep but smiling. He was standing there by the counter, already dressed for work. The morning sun spilled across the room, painting everything gold. He turned, holding 2 mugs, and said, "Morning, sweetheart." I remember thinking how nice that felt. It had been a while since we'd had a quiet moment together. He handed me one of the mugs, and I noticed the faintest tremor in his hand. Just nerves, I thought. He'd been under a lot of stress lately, late nights, distant talks, and something unreadable in his eyes. But marriage goes through phases, right? So I pushed the thought away. I lifted the mug, ready for that comforting first sip, but then I paused. The smell. It wasn't coffee anymore. It was sharper, sour almost, like something chemical hiding under the roast. I frowned and looked down at the mug, swirling the liquid a little. "Did you use a new brand?" I asked, half joking. He froze for a second, just a second, but enough for me to notice. Then he smiled. "Yeah," he said quickly. "Thought you might like a change." Something in me wanted to believe him. I told myself not to overthink. But my gut whispered something else. It told me to wait, to look again. I laughed it off, said I'd go check on my sister-in-law who was staying with us for a few days, and walked out of the kitchen. My heart was beating a little too fast, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. My sister-in-law, Emily, was sitting in the living room scrolling through her phone. She smiled up at me. "Coffee smells good," she said, reaching for her mug on the table. Hers looked identical to mine. For some reason, I just stood there staring at it. The 2 cups were the same size, same design, but mine had a tiny chip on the rim. Hers didn't. I glanced back toward the kitchen. My husband was watching us from the doorway. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I don't even know what made me do it. Maybe instinct, maybe fear. But I set my mug down on the table beside hers when she wasn't looking. Then, when she turned her head, I swapped them. Just like that. Quick. Silent. My hands were shaking. I laughed nervously, saying something about checking the sugar. Then, went back to the kitchen pretending nothing had happened. He was standing there still, pretending to clean the counter, but I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. When I came back, Emily had already taken a sip. She smiled, chatting about something on her phone, completely unaware. I nodded along, but inside, my stomach twisted. A few minutes later, she coughed, just once. Then again, a deeper one. My heart dropped. She said her throat felt strange, that maybe the coffee was too strong. My husband rushed over, too quickly, too concerned. I froze. Everything around me seemed to slow down, the sound of the clock ticking, the mug clattering on the floor, her breath catching. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My body just locked. I looked at him, and for a moment, our eyes met. His face went pale, his expression unreadable. He stammered something about calling for help. But my hands were already on my phone, shaking so badly I could barely press the buttons. In that split second, I realized the truth. Whatever he had put in that coffee wasn't meant for her. It was meant for me. My world cracked open right then and there. The man I loved, the one I shared my life with, had done something unthinkable. And as the siren screamed closer, I could only stand there, trying to make sense of it, of him, of everything. That was the moment everything changed. The smell of coffee will never be the same for me again. I didn't sleep that night. The sound of sirens still echoed in my head, even after the house went quiet. Emily had been taken for observation. The doctor said it might have been a reaction to something she ate earlier. That's what they said, but I knew there was more to it. The way my husband looked at me when the ambulance drove away, it was fear. Not fear for her. Fear of something being found out. I sat on the couch long after he went upstairs. The smell of coffee still hung in the air. That bitter, burnt scent made my stomach twist every time I breathed it in. I kept replaying everything. His shaky hands, that quick fake smile. The way he stood between me and the counter when I asked about the new blend. It all lined up now, in the worst possible way. When I finally went upstairs, he was pretending to sleep. I could tell by his breathing it was too even, too rehearsed. I lay there beside him, staring into the dark, wondering how long this had been building behind my back. You think you know a person, you trust them with your life, and then one morning, everything changes. The next day, I decided to act like nothing had happened. I made breakfast. I smiled. I even thanked him for taking care of things yesterday. But inside, my mind was racing. If there really was something wrong with that coffee, I needed proof. And if there wasn't, then maybe I was losing my mind. Either way, I had to know. He left for work as usual, kissing my forehead before walking out. His touch felt colder than ever. As soon as his car disappeared down the street, I went straight to the kitchen. The mugs were gone, washed, dried, and stacked away neatly. Too neatly. I opened every cupboard, checked every corner of the sink. Nothing. It was like that morning had never happened. But I found something else. Behind the coffee machine, tucked into the small drawer where we keep old receipts, was a crumpled note. It wasn't written to me. It wasn't even signed. Just a few words, rushed and shaky. You have to stop before she finds out. My hands went cold. My throat tightened. I didn't know who had written it or when. But it was his handwriting. I'd seen that same looped Y and that messy lowercase f 1,000 times on grocery lists and birthday cards. My first thought was that it had to be about me. But what did he need to stop? And who was the person warning him? For hours I sat at the table staring at that note. Every sound in the house made me jump the creak of a floorboard, the hum of the fridge, even the birds outside. Everything felt heavy, unreal. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? That I didn't like the smell of my coffee? That my husband smiled wrong? I decided to talk to Emily instead. She came back later that evening, pale but cheerful, saying the doctors told her to rest. I wanted to tell her everything, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to understand first. She looked at me and said something that made my heart stop for a second. He called me from the hospital, asked if I was okay, said he was sorry for what happened. He sounded scared. That word stuck in my head. Scared of what? That night? I stayed awake again, listening to the soft rhythm of rain tapping against the windows. My husband's breathing beside me sounded calm, almost peaceful. But mine wasn't. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw that note. Every time I breathed, I smelled that same strange bitterness that wasn't quite coffee and wasn't quite gone. And deep down, something in me whispered the one thought I couldn't shake. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. Something bigger was hiding under the surface, waiting to be found. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I couldn't stay in bed any longer. My husband was still asleep beside me, his face calm, almost peaceful. I stared at him for a long time, trying to see the man I used to know, the one who made me laugh, who remembered my coffee order, who promised me forever. But something had changed. Or maybe, I thought, something had always been there and I'd just never seen it. I slipped out of bed quietly and went downstairs. The kitchen was spotless again, too spotless. Every surface gleamed. Every item was in its exact place. It didn't feel lived in anymore, it felt staged, like a scene that had been carefully cleaned of its story. I made myself a new cup of coffee, different beans, fresh water. The smell this time was pure, warm, familiar. But it didn't calm me. I sat by the table and opened my phone. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe something that would make sense of all this. My husband's behavior had been strange for months. Long phone calls late at night. Messages he'd delete before I could see them. A distance that crept between us like fog. I used to think he was just stressed. Now, I wasn't sure. I opened our shared email account. He never used it, but sometimes important things still came through. That's when I saw it. An unread message, marked from a sender I didn't recognize. The subject line simply said, "About what you did." My heart skipped. The message was short, only one line. You promised it would end quietly. No signature, no details, just those words. My fingers trembled as I scrolled down, but there was nothing else. No attachments, no trail. I checked the date. It was sent 2 weeks ago. My mind spun with questions. Who sent it? What did they mean by "end quietly"? Was this connected to that note I found? I heard the stairs creak above me and quickly closed the email. He walked into the kitchen, still half asleep, and smiled when he saw me. "You're up early," he said, reaching for a mug. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Couldn't sleep." He poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter, just watching me. I felt his eyes trace every small movement I made. The way I stirred my cup, the way I glanced toward the window. There was a silence between us that felt heavy, like both of us were pretending to live inside a version of life that had already broken. He finally said, "You seemed upset yesterday. Everything okay?" His tone was calm, but his fingers tapped the counter lightly, a rhythm that didn't match his words. "I'm fine," I said. "Just worried about Emily." His eyes flickered for a second, then he smiled again. "She's fine. Just an allergy," they said. "You worry too much." Maybe I did. But maybe I didn't worry enough. When he left for work, I didn't sit down. I started looking. The note, the email, the strange smell, it all had to connect somehow. I opened drawers, checked files, flipped through notebooks. For a long time, nothing made sense. And then I found the small brown envelope tucked inside one of his jackets. It was unsealed. Inside were old photos, some of us, smiling, happy, but also pictures I didn't recognize. One of Emily. One of a woman I'd never seen before. On the back of that picture, in my husband's handwriting, were 3 words that made my heart stop. "She knows too much." I didn't understand. Who was this woman? What did she know? And why was her photo hidden here? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My world felt smaller, the air thicker. I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. He was back. Too soon. I shoved the photos into my robe pocket just as the door opened. He walked in, surprised to see me still there. "Forgot my phone," he said, his eyes scanning the room. "You look pale. You okay?" I nodded too quickly. "Just tired." He smiled softly, then stepped closer. "You know, you don't have to worry about everything. Some things are better left alone." His voice was low, calm, but something in the way he said it sent a chill through me. After he left again, I locked the door. My hands were shaking. Every word, every look, every gesture from him suddenly felt like a clue. And for the first time, I started to realize that maybe I'd been living in someone else's story all along, a story he'd been writing quietly, behind my back. That evening, I decided to do something I hadn't done in months. I called my best friend, Nora. She was the kind of person who could read between my silences. When she picked up, I didn't know where to start. "Nora," I whispered, "I think something's wrong. Really wrong." She didn't ask for proof. She just said, "I'm coming over." And as I stood by the window waiting for her car lights to appear, I felt the first flicker of something I hadn't felt in days, hope. But that hope didn't last long. Because when Nora arrived and stepped into the house, her expression changed instantly. She looked past me, toward the living room, and her voice came out quiet but firm. "Alik, he's here." I froze. I froze when Nora said those words. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misheard her, but the look on her face told me I hadn't. He was here. My husband, who had left only minutes ago, was standing in the living room. He stepped out from the shadows near the hallway, calm, as if he'd been waiting the whole time. "I forgot my wallet," he said, holding it up with a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. Nora looked at me, and I knew she felt it too, that uneasy current hanging in the air. He glanced between us. "You called someone?" he said softly. "That's new." I tried to speak, but my throat felt dry. "I needed a friend." He nodded, almost thoughtfully. "Of course you did. You always need answers, don't you, Alec?" He set the wallet down on the table and walked slowly toward me. Nora took a half step closer to my side, protective, without saying a word. Something in me broke then, the fear, the confusion, all the silent questions that had been eating at me. "Why are you hiding things from me?" I asked. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. "What's going on? Who sent that message? What did you do?" He stopped, met my eyes, and for a long moment didn't answer. Then, finally, he sighed. "I was trying to fix something before it got worse," he said, "but I didn't know how to tell you." "Fix what?" I whispered. He looked away, his shoulders sinking. "Emily, she's been struggling. There's money missing from the clinic, and I found out she was involved. She begged me not to tell you, said she'd pay it back. The coffee," he hesitated, "wasn't what you think. She tried a new detox powder, said it would help me sleep. I didn't want you to worry, so I threw it out. I thought if I cleaned everything up, none of this would touch you." His words rushed out, tangled with guilt and exhaustion. For a second, I didn't know what to believe. Could it be true? Could all the strange behavior, the secret notes, the deleted messages, really be about protecting someone else? Nora stepped forward. "Then what about the message, the photos, the note that said you have to stop before she finds out?" He looked shocked. "You found that?" His voice dropped. "That was from Emily. She was warning me to stop covering for her. She didn't want you dragged into it." Silence filled the room, heavy and thick. The tension that had lived between us for weeks suddenly shifted into something else, sadness, maybe even relief. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But part of me still wondered why he hadn't just told me the truth. "Why didn't you come to me?" I asked quietly. He rubbed his face with both hands. "Because I knew what you'd say. You'd tell me to do the right thing, and I wasn't ready to lose my sister. I thought if I could fix it quietly, we could go back to normal." Normal. The word felt so distant now, like something we'd lost long ago. Nora reached for my hand. "Alec," she said softly, "you have a choice now. You can keep this secret with him, or you can end it by telling the truth." I looked at my husband, the man I'd loved, the man who'd built walls instead of bridges, and in that moment, I realized the truth wasn't just about what happened. It was about why it happened. Fear, shame, silence. They destroy trust faster than any lie. He whispered, "I'm sorry," and I could see he meant it. But apologies couldn't undo the cracks. I turned toward the window. Outside, the rain had stopped, but everything still glistened with its aftermath. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "We can't fix this by hiding it anymore." He didn't move. He just nodded, eyes down, knowing what that meant. That was the moment I decided to tell the truth to the police, to Emily, to myself. Because secrets, no matter how carefully buried, always find a way to rise back up. And as I stood there beside Nora, feeling both broken and brave, I knew this was the real turning point. The life I had before was gone. What came next would be something entirely new. The days that followed felt like walking through fog. Every sound seemed distant, every word too heavy. The truth was out. Emily admitted what she had done, and the missing money was finally traced. It turned out my husband hadn't lied about that part, but knowing the reason didn't erase the ache that lingered between us. He tried to explain again and again how fear made him hide things, how he thought silence could keep the peace. But silence only grows heavier with time. And trust, once cracked, never fits back the same way. For a while, we lived like polite strangers. We still shared meals, still spoke about ordinary things, but something invisible stood between us. I would look at him and see both the man who once made me feel safe and the man who kept me in the dark. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen, the same place where everything had started. The coffee machine sat quietly in the corner. I made myself a cup, the normal way, the way I used to before all of this. The smell filled the room, warm, simple, real. I took a slow sip and, for the first time in weeks, didn't feel afraid. Sometimes I think about how easily life can change. One morning can redraw every line of trust you thought was unbreakable. I think about how secrets, no matter the reason, can twist love into suspicion. I told the truth in the end. Emily faced what she had done, and my husband faced the shame that came with hiding it. We didn't separate, at least not then. But we learned that love has to be built again from honesty, not habit. When people ask me what happened, I never tell them everything. I just say it started with a cup of coffee. Because that's all it really takes, one small thing that makes you look a little closer, listen a little harder, and finally see what was always there. Sometimes I still wake early, make a fresh pot, and sit by the window while the world is still quiet. I breathe in the scent and remind myself that fear fades but lessons stay. If you're listening to this, maybe you felt that same shift, the moment when something ordinary becomes the start of something you can't ignore. Maybe your story is different, but the feeling is the same. So ask yourself, what truths are hiding in plain sight? And if you found them tomorrow, would you be ready to face them?